Chapter 4. The Ayatollah Khomeini, a new leader for Iran. I had problems with the socio-political system in Iran like many other students. Why should a student struggle with poverty and be forced to sleep on the street in a rich, oil-based country and be threatened with the termination of his studies when he's working tirelessly for his future? These conditions made me angry towards the Shah. The country was rich, but only for rich people who had built stronger relationships with high-ranking government officers. Middle-class citizens, villagers, and students suffered. It wasn't hard to find motives to join the students' revolutionary movement against the Iranian government. Gradually, I became zealous in my opposition of the Shah's regime, but I still did not have a clear ideological path in Islam. My belief in the existence of a divine creator did not mean that I really understood all aspects of Islam's philosophy. I had joined the Islamic group only because they believed the world was created by God and also were questioning the economic injustices in Iran. We did not have the resources to study other religions and did not have time to indulge in a deeper study of Islam and its political, economic, social, and ethical principles to decide if Islam would give us a better future. We did not understand how our society would change under the rule of Islam. We were told that Islam was a solution for everything, and if we expected to be the best nation in the world, we must follow the mullahs and commit ourselves to the Ayatollah Khomeini, who was sent into exile in 1963 by the Shah and living in Iraq. The mullahs also told us that discussion about the future was not a priority since the Shah, the cause of all injustice, was in power. The first and most urgent step for overcoming injustice was to get rid of the Shah. The mullahs were able to progressively establish a strong connection between us and the Ayatollah Khomeini and prepare us to follow his instructions diligently. Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, eventually forced the Ayatollah Khomeini to leave Iraq. In October 1978, he made his way to France. While in France, he continued to organize his return to Iran from the new foreign headquarters. The Ayatollah was a convincing speaker and seemingly a stronger leader than the Shah. His opposition to the Shah was favored by some contemporary Western leaders who wanted Islamic theocracy as a shield against the influence of Russian communism. The Ayatollah wisely tailored his message to be less religious and more economic and socio-political in order to encourage resistance to the Shah's regime. He wanted support from non-religious and nominal Muslims as well. But under the surface, the Ayatollah's opposition was neither political nor social nor economic. It was in reality a result of the Shah's acceptance of Israel as a Jewish country, which violated Islamic obligations. Jews, according to Islam, did not deserve to have anything or any land. The Shah was an apostate in the eyes of the Ayatollah and had to be removed from leadership and killed. Despite Islam's intolerance of atheism, the Ayatollah Khomeini even invited atheists to join the revolutionary movement. He never spoke publicly against any non-Muslim groups that were against the Shah before the revolution. His overriding goal was to gain power among the public in order to overthrow the kingdom of the Shah, and for this reason, he needed the unity of all groups, if only temporarily. Despite Khomeini's hypocrisy to various opposition groups, his tactics worked among the masses. They were frustrated at the repressive economic and political system in place, and unable to discern Khomeini's true underlying motives. He was able to persuade revolutionaries that his intention was to rescue Iran from economic hardship and dictatorship set up by the ruling government. He made Iranians believe he would establish equal opportunity among all groups in Iran. He continually announced that freedom and democracy were the rights of every Iranian, but the Shah had stolen them. Economic prosperity was certain for Iran because of its oil, but the Shah abused its wealth and left many citizens with little. The Ayatollah based his propaganda on these issues to win Iranian support. We believed his claims because of the hardships Iranians faced under the Shah's rule. Never did we imagine that when he attained power, he would disregard Iranian well-being and sacrifice human rights, all to establish authoritarian Islamic government and terrorism. The mullahs also, who were the close companions to the Ayatollah Khomeini, never spoke against atheism or other religious groups, but against the current injustices in Iran. They encouraged us to be more zealous in fighting the Shah. We thought that they were encouraging us to help demolish injustice and establish justice. We never thought they did not care about justice at all and only wanted to establish Islamic rule that would subject its people to Islamic law, the Sharia. We based our obedience and allegiance blindly on their propaganda that Islam was the most superior religion and could lead the country to democracy. We never studied Islam closely enough to see how genuine the Ayatollah and the other mullahs were in their claims. Like many others, I believe that Islam could address the inconsistencies of our culture, close the gap between the rich and the poor, and lead us to democracy. We did not realize the heart of Islam was incompatible with freedom and democracy. The Ayatollah Khomeini's proclamation of freedom delivered a landslide victory for him and his committed mullahs so that they gained wealth and power, but it blocked the country's path to freedom. By our surrender to the Ayatollah Khomeini, we became our own worst enemies, handing over our country to the mullahs who made our motherland a prison. Revolutionary. The revolution caused me to strongly attach myself to political Islam and stay close to Muslim fundamentalists. I found a place in my heart for Muslims involved in terrorism against the Shah's officials and those who had fought Israelis in Palestine, Lebanon, and other Islamic countries. The Shah killed some of these Muslims while imprisoning or exiling others. Those in exile or prison sent messages to encourage us to resist the Shah before the revolution. We secretly distributed their messages, books, essays, and audio cassettes to people to unify resistance to the Shah. This revolutionary idea occupied our hearts and minds, so we tried every means to weaken the Shah's rule. The Shah's regime tried every possible way to suffocate the revolutionary movement. One day, before dawn, civil police invaded our apartment looking for any evidence of our involvement with terrorist Muslims. Thanks to one of our neighbors, we were warned in advance, and before the police raided, we removed all the revolutionary literature we had collected. In less than 2 years, revolutionary books were distributed everywhere and openly sold in the streets. The Shah's government was not able to remove the books anymore and could not control the situation. Our activities to fuel the revolution drew the attention of many young people. Believing somehow that they could empower the revolutionaries, they burned banks, public houses, and buses in a nationwide protest. Hometown revolutionary. After completing college in 1978, I returned to my hometown, Talesh in Gilan, the northern state of Iran. Gilan was pro-Shah and closed off to the spread of the revolutionary mindset. Why? Gilan's musical culture was not compatible with the fundamentalist Islam of the Ayatollah Khomeini, which was anti-music. Its seashore attracted non-religious tourists who spread a Western way of life, and the Shah himself, who favored Western culture, came from the north. My hometown had a fourth reason. Many people were bound by a feudal and tribal heritage, and their words carried weight among the native Taleshis. Many locals walked miles from the villages to the city to express their support for the Shah. The Shah had lost support in many states, but the people of northern Iran were working hard and hoping to give him moral support to maintain power. The opposition in other states were outspoken, but not in Talesh, so I worked hard along with other revolutionary men and women to spread the spirit of the revolution in the area. My activities allowed me to advance as an Islamic leader, even though I was still unaware of the true nature of Islam. I knew only the superficial rites and rituals, enough to be a Muslim. I knew how to wash, how and where to stand for prayer, what not to handle, taste, or touch. This was the extent of the Islamic knowledge of most radical Muslims. We were taught to imitate and follow Muhammad, his successors and religious leaders. We were gradually indoctrinated to believe that there must be no choice when it comes to Islam. If Muhammad, as the Superman of Islam, was forced by the angel to follow Allah, what choice did we have except to follow Islam? Our commitment to the Ayatollah Khomeini grew day after day. Soon I began to look like him and act like him. I even desired to become a mullah like him and dressed in a cleric's cloak. We believe Khomeini to be the best contemporary follower of Muhammad, and we tried our best to fulfill his orders and instructions, inciting riots against the Shah to force him to leave the country. By 1978, bookshops were overflowing with propaganda that fueled the revolution. The Shah was losing power, and it seemed as though everyone's thoughts in urban areas were focused on overthrowing him. I joined the army to serve the mandatory 2-year military obligation in the meantime, and was sent to the garrison of Esfahan, located in the middle of Iran, south of Tehran. The garrison of Esfahan trains in ground-to-air fighting techniques using various tanks. I was trained on the 23mm tank. A substantial number of other students there were also revolutionaries, and we began to hold secret meetings to plan a unified effort of religious and non-religious soldiers to destroy the hierarchy of the garrison. We encouraged all students and soldiers to violate the regulations and policies of their commanders and cause chaos in the mess hall and during different programs whenever the general commander was present. Unable to discipline everyone, the garrison authorities quickly lost control. The commanders sought the major revolutionary leaders who had incited the insubordination to kill them. I managed to escape Tehran, where it was easy to hide and work with other revolutionaries. We did whatever we could to bring the Shah down from his throne, and we opened the way for the Ayatollah Khomeini to come back to Iran. We held street protests, broke and burned government buildings and vehicles. By this time, the Shah lost Western support, especially the support of his best ally, America. He and his family left Iran and selected a prime minister to temporarily rule the country until his return. A king dethroned. The Air Force joined the revolutionaries when the Shah left on January 16, 1979, rendering the government incapable of controlling public demonstrations and riots. The army continued to lose power. I did not need to hide anymore, so I went back to my hometown to be with my family and to stir the people of that area against the Shah's ruling prime minister. The majority of the people in my hometown fought against the revolutionary movement with propaganda favoring the Shah's kingdom. The political mindset of the area was more of a feudalist, autocratic one, serving the causes of upper-class citizens who did not want the lower-class mullahs and others to have a place in the political hierarchy. It was easy to maintain favor for the Shah. The people believed heads of communities or the aristocracy were able to better relate to parliamentarians, senators, or politicians and revive the kingdom that had run for thousands of years in Iran. This autocratic leadership was interwoven into the people's way of life, and the natives felt obligated to bow down in front of the autocrats. When these feudal lords called the people to resist the revolutionaries, the people obeyed and pledged their allegiance to this call. Only the younger, educated generations, who were still a minority, favored change and adventure and were receptive to fighting against the system. Some of the area's mullahs were fiscally obligated to local leaders and showed no interest in the revolution. After their speeches in mosques, they always prayed, "Long live the Shah and his kingdom." However, after the revolution, they all claimed to be revolutionaries. The key revolutionary mullahs in the capital city of Tehran diverted the socio-political path of the revolution into a strictly religious undertaking and employed a majority of the mullahs who had previously served autocrats, the kingdom, or remained neutral. According to Khomeini's law, those mullahs who were in the service of the Shah's regime had to be sentenced to imprisonment or death. They supported a king who maintained friendly relations with Israel and was pro-West. Khomeini spared them, however, because they were clerics, and clerics had to have more rights than others according to Islam. As Khomeini became a shelter for these mullahs after the revolution, they also became shelters for many of their past autocratic masters in exchange for monetary payoffs. The former oppressors found protection from the threats of young revolutionaries who wanted to hold them accountable for their injustices. Some of the former autocratic leaders were even given military and governmental positions and made life miserable for those who were once the arms and legs of the revolution. They now held positions that allowed them to torture and kill those revolutionaries who were fighting for democracy. I was once beaten by a few of these ex-autocrats a year after the revolution, falling unconscious in the street. The Ayatollah Khomeini quickly entered the scene after the Shah vacated his throne in Iran. It was a momentous occasion for me and all who had fought against the Shah's rule. Khomeini's arrival on February 1, 1979, also signaled defeat for the army, who eventually surrendered. The Shah's government collapsed. His appointed prime minister escaped, and the revolutionaries took over. Tears of happiness flowed freely from all who supported the revolution, making Khomeini's return to Iran a day of celebration. We had overthrown the most powerful government in the Middle East and believed that we had opened the doors for all Iranians to take part in governing their country and advancing prosperity. What a heartbreak only months after the revolution, when we learned our zealous allegiance to the Ayatollah Khomeini and his surrounding mullahs had been abused and our plans for Iran's future had been ignored for the sake of establishing the theocratic rule of Islam.